If you've been on my channel for any length of time, you might recognize this little dude. Fish jump scare. Not only do I have a pattern for the goldfish available on my channel, but he has also shown up in multiple challenge videos. And while I love him dearly, he's one of my favorite patterns to have ever designed, really. Today, we're going to level him up. We're taking this basic design and we're going to make it a bit fancy. This is something that I've very much wanted to do for a while. Yes, as I've said, I love my little fish, but he is basic, and that was literally the point of it when I was making it. But he's kind of like angular, you know, geometric, all sharp points, and I want to smooth those out a little bit. So that's just going to be the plan today. We're taking an old pattern and we're upgrading it. Here's my hippocampus that I was working on the other day. Oh, and there's some some artwork. I forgot I let my nibblings use this book. Okay. Yeah, we might just have to maybe we'll share some space with the hippocampus. So this is what we've got at the moment. As I said, it's all kind of sharp angles, a bit like geometric looking in the fins, and I want to smooth that out. We're going for a bit more of a sleek, elegant look. Why am I still standing up? I can sit back down. So this is what we're working with. I want to maintain the same shape. And we've got the mouth here. Ooh, little fishy mouth. So I want to maintain that shape. I'm even probably going to use the exact same pattern. There's the potential to chuck in a couple of tweaks, but for the most part, I want to stick to what I've already got. The one change I am going to make here, though, is to include scales on the back, probably, I don't know, 2/3 or so. But where we're going to see the greatest difference in this pattern, I think, is going to be the fins. So with the tail, I'm going to take this triangular shape and I want to give it some more movement. So we're going to my hippocampus is going to get in the way here. So I want something that flows a little bit more. And the same is going to apply to like the dorsal fin. You know, I don't think I'm going to attempt ventral fins in this pattern, because if the dorsal or the pectoral fins, not the dorsal fin, that's the dorsal fin, if the pectoral fins are as large as I plan to make them, then they're just going to cover where the ventral fins would be potentially anyway. So I'm going to omit them for now. That is way out of proportion, but that's sort of what I'm going for. So I'm going to omit them for now. But if I think the goldfish, the fancy goldfish pattern could benefit from the addition of them later on, we can just crochet them then. So that is sort of what I'm going for. As I said, long flowing fins. Can picture them sort of trailing behind the fish as they'd swim gently through the water, and then sort of 2/3 of the way up from the body, that's where we'll start the scales. And for this fancy fish upgrade, that sounds like a cat food, doesn't it? Fancy fish. Anyway, for this fancy fish upgrade project I'm working on, I have picked out some purple yarns, because this project is actually going to serve two purposes. One, to upgrade my goldfish, but also I'm going to give the finished project to my nephew, because his favorite color is purple, and also a fish is his like little character. When we do our gaming, you know, some weekends we each have our own little character. I've got my dino, my sister has a wolf, one of my nephews has a fish, and my other nephew, he's undecided as of now, so you'll probably see me create an animal for him at some point in the future too. But today I am focused on the fish. So even when I'm done here, because I have a little bit of purple, the chunky yarn left, I might even make a version in that, and I can include some extra detail if I want to go that far. But first we actually have to come up with the pattern itself. So let me get up my original goldfish pattern, because yep, I'm keeping it as close to the original as possible. All right, so the goldfish pattern, the original goldfish pattern is like 20 rounds. So maybe the first I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 or 9 are going to be scale free, and then the rest is where we're going to attach those scales. So you go back there, please. So for those of you playing along at home, we'll start with 8. We may bump it up to 9, but those first few rounds are just going to be an exact replica of my original goldfish pattern. I went with the first 9 rounds of the body. So I've made those scale free, and it is from this point onwards where we're going to attach the scales. There's kind of 2 ways that I can kind of approach this. I was thinking of including the scales or crocheting them as I go. So for example, this next round, round 10, I would crochet the scales in the front loop, and then the following round, which I wouldn't include scales in, would be worked in the back loop, and I would keep doing that, alternating between working scales in the front loop and then no scales in the back loop for the following round. That could work, but one thing that I like to try and do is keep my patterns as customizable as possible, and in order to achieve that in this situation, I'm thinking instead of going the route of incorporating the scales as I crochet this point, I will just work the remaining rounds in the back loop only, leaving those front loops free, and then come back later and crochet the scales onto that. So I don't know how I'm going to do the scales at this point, whether I do a shell stitch and a slip stitch and then repeat that, whether I do single crochet between, if I do half double crochet, I don't know. I'm not sure yet how I'm going to do the scales, but my point is, if I leave the front loop free, I can do that however I like, and if you guys create this pattern for yourselves at some point and you have a different idea of how the scales could be worked, you can do that, because the front loops are free. You can do whatever you want in them. This is easier than moving the camera. If I was following the original pattern, I would have 1 more round to crochet. But instead, I've decided to make just a little bit of a change. When it comes to sewing on the tail in the original pattern, I personally found that it was fairly easy to accidentally make it lopsided. So you're supposed to sew the tail pieces over that final round, but depending on a number of factors, like if you put the safety eyes in the correct spots, where you put the dorsal fin and the pectoral fin, so on and so forth, it was easy to have those just a little bit offside. To try and circumvent that, I am going to single crochet the final round here together. That will give me a distinct line of stitches, and it is to those stitches where we will sew the tail or tail pieces later on. I hope that in doing this, it makes the tail just that little bit easier to attach. So instead of decreasing down to 6, which is what I would normally do in the original pattern, I'm instead going to work my way down to the bottom of the piece. Here, I need to crochet probably 2 single crochet for that 1, 2, and I'm not doing this in the back loop only, this bit. And then I'm just going to single crochet the 8 stitches I have together. And I think that's worked out pretty well. So my eyes are here, and the tail, I don't know what we call this, the tail base, it's kind of centered between them. If I really wanted to, I could I could crochet the tail directly off of here, but I do, as I said earlier, I do like to make my patterns customizable, so I want to leave people with the option of crocheting multiple tail pieces if they want to, and I don't think that would work as well if I jumped straight into crocheting the tail as an extension of the body piece. So we're going to finish off for now. I was going to say I made good progress on the body piece, but Truth is, I don't think I've made much progress at all because it is literally the same pattern as this, except for the very last round. So it's same old, really, just some of it's worked in the back loops only. Speaking of the back loops, I think I'm going to do the fins, not the fins, the scales. I think I'm going to do the scales next. I was thinking about doing the fins after the body and sewing them on first and then crocheting the scales, but that would just get in the way of me working in the round. So I do think it's a better idea to crochet the scales first, and then I can sew the fins either on top of those or part the scales a little bit and sew them directly to the body that way. I'm trying to think of this in terms of writing the pattern down and explaining it to someone else, just making it as easy as possible, because this was sort of a beginner, advanced beginner pattern, and I want to keep this sort of in the same realm. Nothing more difficult than sort of advanced beginner level. And I think the way you approach or explain a pattern is one of the things that determines its difficulty level. So keeping this simple as possible, simple as I can, and that means scales next. It looks more like a hedgehog than a fish. I know from experience that there is kind of this phenomenon where I'll be incredibly skeptical about my amigurumi until that very last moment where I assemble it all and the whole thing just comes together. I can look at the individual pieces and be like, but at the end, the final product is usually okay. I'm really hoping that this is the case in this situation because, yeah, I'm just getting straight up hedgehog from that. Fancy is what I was going for, but flop is what I've got so far. That is the reality of designing amigurumi though. Sometimes it just doesn't work, but I'm not going to frog anything just yet. I'm going to make the other pieces that I need, and I'll make my final determination once I've put them together. So I think the next piece I want to tackle is the tail. And in order to do that, I think I'm going to start with the bottom of the tail here and then just work my way up from there. How long do I want this tail? I do want this piece to be a bit larger than the original. I mean, that seems like a good length to start with. Can you guys see that? And then we'll end on a couple of slip stitches, but I want to leave the rest of the row unworked. So hopefully this little bit here will be this bit of the fin down the bottom. Slip stitch. What do we reckon? Is that... It's not really wide enough, is it? I mean, we're going for fancy here. We need something a little bit fancier than that. So maybe 2 more rows would do it. And bear in mind, that's just the one side of the fluke here. I think that's actually wide enough for my purposes. If I can manage to do this last slip stitch, I like the look of it. But what I really want to do is pinch the end together. And to do that, I'm just going to slip stitch into my first chain of like the original foundation chain. So I'm going to slip stitch into there. And I think that is a much better shape. But now I just need to replicate that for the top of the tail. I might even make the top a little bit bigger. It's a good time of the day to be doing this. My nibblings just turned up after school. I can ignore them for a bit because my other sister is home. So I am going to reverse what I've just done. So I will increase out until I reach this point here. So I'm going to increase out to there. But I think I might add just an additional 2 rounds on top of that. That way I'll make the tail piece, or the top of the tail piece, a little bit bigger. Oh, you know what? I'm actually really digging how this looks so far. It's not attached yet, but I do like this shape. As with the bottom section, I do want to pinch the end, and I'm also thinking I want to add in some stitches here so I can easily sew the tail to the base that we made at the end of the body of the goldfish. And so there we have the tail. So this is the top piece because it's got the traily end. Even if I'm not, 100% happy with the scales, I am pretty damn pleased with how the tail turned out. So I will take that win. But the reason I wanted to do the tail piece first, aside from the fact that it's the larger of the pieces I had left and I just wanted to get it out the way, is that I could take what I learned from here and reuse it to crochet both the pectoral fins and the dorsal fin. Because I think that shape there, for example, so the top of the tail, that would work nicely as a fancy dorsal fin. And then the bottom of the tail piece, so the slightly narrower one, that could work as fancy pectoral fins. If I feel like it, I might make a second tail piece as I've done in the original, but that is one of those things that is customizable. You can have one tail piece, you can have 2, you can have 4, you can have 20 if you want. I don't know why anyone would want 20, but I'm not going to tell you what to do. I did end up having to stop filming yesterday. The nibblings were just getting a bit too rowdy, so we're going to finish off this evening instead. All I have left to do, though, is the two pectoral fins, so I'm going to get them out of the way first. And like I did with the dorsal fin yesterday, I'm just going to make the pectoral fin, that is the word I'm looking for, the pectoral fins, sort of an altered version of the original tail pattern. That worked out really well for me in the dorsal fin, and I'm hoping the same will apply here. All my pieces are complete at this stage, so now I can start putting them together. I really hope this thing comes together nicely. My thought was that if I looked at this body piece, the hedgehog looking thing, through fresh eyes today, it might look a little bit better to me than it did yesterday. Sadly, that's not the case so far. Let's start with the tail, because I'm interested to see if my little experiment where I put in I joined the last round together, if that will yield any results. Okay, and we're going to join the final 4 stitches of the body to the 4 stitches I put in at the end of the tail pattern. I think that actually worked out okay. The tail is basically in line or centered between the eyes if you view it from the front, and that's kind of what I was going for. So experiment successful. Now that it's attached, I really do like the shape that I've come up with here. It's almost exactly what I pictured. Perhaps I could have made the base of the tail a little bit wider too. Hopefully, because I've used a very similar pattern for the dorsal fin and the pectoral fins as well, I will have similar feelings about them. But I won't know for sure until I sew them on, and we'll start with the dorsal fin. I'm thinking I should probably just sew it directly over the scales. I could try and part them and sew the base of the dorsal fin straight onto the body, but that's going to be difficult because the scales are overlapping. I won't be able to get a straight line down towards the back or the tail of the goldfish. So on top of the scales it is. I don't know if any of you remember this, but I think I've mentioned a couple of times that I lost my little blue spider, which was my pin holder. I have been looking for that for months now and I still haven't found it. I moved it out of the way at some point so my niece wouldn't play with it, because obviously I don't want her playing with pins, and I cannot find where I put it. So it must be in a very safe place. I just don't know where that safe place is. But I'm going to keep you all updated on the pin spider saga until I find it. All right. That's not looking too bad. I don't know if it's quite enough to convince me to change my mind about the scales, but I don't hate it. But I'm going to put on the pectoral fins, and hang on a second. You know what I actually think this goldfish could benefit from is maybe if I put in some stitches sort of around the border here between the face and where the scales start to sort of delineate those two sides. It might ease the transition a little bit, and I think it'll be easier to do that before I sew on the pectoral fin. I don't know if I made things better or worse, but we're going to soldier on. While I've got my yarn out, I will add the mouth as well because I'll have to do that at some point anyway. You know, for only being 6 stitches, I really do think the mouth makes a big difference to the overall piece. But before I draw any conclusions about the entirety of this project, I do want to add the pectoral fins. And I think we've done it. We have successfully fancified our goldfish. So we have original, fancy. Original, fancy. While I do say it was a success, I do believe it was, there are still a few minor tweaks I think I could make to this, which means I'm probably going to make a second fancy goldfish. And I present to you Fancy Goldfish version 2. I didn't make a whole heap of changes. I mean, that wasn't the plan anyway. Some of the ones I did make include I shaped the dorsal fin a little bit differently. So this one should be slightly taller at the front here than the original. Is that showing up on the camera? I played around with things such as changing the eye placement and the dorsal fin placement. The result of that being I prefer the eye placement of the first goldfish, but I do like the placement of the pectoral fins in the second goldfish more. Another thing I did with the pectoral fins that you might have noticed is I changed the color of them. In the original, I used the same yarn as I did for the rest of the body, the scales, tail, etc. But in the second version, I changed my mind and I recrocheted the pectoral fins in the original or the main color yarn. And I'll be honest, I like that better. It makes the fins stand out a little bit more. So, I mean, if you make this pattern for yourself, you can decide what yarn you want to use. But I definitely think I like the pectoral fins done in the original yarn. And then the final change I made, which I was hoping would be the most obvious, but gonna be real here, I don't think it is I changed up the scales. In the original version, I separated my crochet clusters. So I used single crochet, half double crochet, and then double crochet as I made my way down the body. But I separated those clusters with 2 slip stitches. In this version, I changed up the order of my clusters somewhat, but the big difference is I only put 1 slip stitch between each of those clusters. And the result is just fuller looking scales, really. I'm feeling better about how the original scales look now than I was before. I think the look has grown on me, and I'm not sure which one I prefer, because while this one was giving me hedgehog vibes initially, this one is sort of giving me pine cone vibes now. Just that full look reminds me of a pine cone. Maybe you guys can tell me which one you prefer, if you can see much of a difference at all, because looking at them from a distance, other than this one being like the slightest bit thicker, bit more of a chunky boy, it doesn't make much of a difference really. But now that I've gone ahead and made those slight adjustments that probably nobody but me will care about or even notice, I am going to go ahead and make my third and final fancy goldfish. I think I said at the start of this video that I wanted to make one for my nephew because a little purple fishy is like his avatar when he does gaming stuff. And I have been trying to think of a project for which I can use up this Premier Parfait Chunky purple yarn. This actually turned out almost exactly as I was picturing it. It's got the same base shape as the OG goldfish. It has the long flowing fins. It has the scales that I wanted. One maybe minor tweak I would make would be to the scales. Let me tell you, I've been going back and forth on these scales for days, asking myself, do I like them or do I not? And I think this is where I've settled. I like them. I think they could just benefit from some changes. But anyway, for comparison's sake, here is the original goldfish and here is the fancy version. And just to show you the larger sizes too, here is the original of that and here is the fancy version. For those who would like to follow in my footsteps and make their own army of goldfish, the written pattern will be available on Patreon. I am considering making a video tutorial on this too, so let me know if you'd be interested in that, but that won't be for weeks, if not months yet, because I've got a whole bunch of other stuff I need to finish off first. Today's featured creator on the hookup is My Little Sillies, and she says, I'm a stay-at-home mum with a little too much time on my hands that recently fell back in love with crochet. I crochet plushies and plushie accessories in a variety of styles, ranging from chickens to monsters to bees and plenty in between. There's a little bit of something for everyone. Absolutely, I totally agree with that. I think that's one of my favorite things about amigurumi, but crochet as well. You can make pretty much anything. You're just sort of limited by your imagination. So if you would like to see the specifics of what My Little Sillies has made, all their links will be down in the description, and so will a link to the hookup form if you would like to apply for yourself. Thank you all very much for watching. Consider subscribing if you haven't already. Like the video if you enjoyed it, share it if you think it's worth sharing, and I will see you in the next one.